The day I realized my husband had forgotten my worth did not come with shouting. There was no fight. No raised voices. It came quietly, in a moment so small that anyone else might have missed it. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same one I had cleaned every morning for years. The light from the window fell softly on his face. He was scrolling through his phone, not really looking at me. I said his name. Once. Then again. He did not hear me. And in that silence, something inside me finally understood the truth. I had given him my strength.
My time.
My youth. I had built a life around his dreams, believing that love meant standing quietly behind someone while they moved forward. But in that moment, I felt invisible. Not unloved. Not hated. Just unseen. I smiled, the way I always did. I told myself it was nothing. That he was tired. That work was heavy on his mind. I had spent years making excuses for him. Years telling myself that my sacrifices did not need to be noticed to have value. But that night, when I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing, I felt something new. Not anger. Not bitterness. A slow, heavy sadness. I wondered when it had happened, when I became the background of his life instead of the partner. When my support became expected instead of appreciated. I remembered the early days. When he looked at me like I mattered. When he thanked me for small things. When my presence was not just assumed. Somewhere along the way, I had disappeared inside the life I helped build. And the hardest part was this. He did not forget me on purpose. He simply got used to me being strong. Being quiet. Being there. That night, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What happens when the woman who supports everyone finally feels unsupported herself? This is my story. Not of anger, not of blame, but of a woman who gave everything and had to learn, slowly and painfully, that being loyal does not mean being invisible. Before I tell you how everything began to fall apart, I need to tell you how it all began. Because our story did not start with pain. It started with hope. I met my husband when we were both young and unsure of the world. He had dreams that were bigger than his confidence. I had a heart that believed in people more than plans. He talked about the future like it was something bright and waiting for him. A better job, a stable home, a life where he could finally feel proud of himself. When he spoke, his eyes carried fear and excitement at the same time. I saw someone who needed belief. So I gave him mine. In those early years, love felt simple. We did not have much money. Our home was small. The walls were thin, and the furniture did not match. But we laughed easily. We talked late into the night. We dreamed together. When he struggled at work, I listened. When he doubted himself, I reminded him of who he was. When he felt tired, I carried the weight quietly. I told myself this was what marriage meant. Standing together. Lifting each other when one felt weak. When opportunities came for him, I stepped back without complaint. If he needed extra hours, I adjusted my life. If he needed silence, I made space. I supported him in ways that were invisible but constant. Cooking meals so he could rest. Handling the house so his mind could focus. Putting my own wants on hold because his dreams felt important. Sometimes people praised him for how far he had come. They called him hardworking, focused, strong. I stood nearby and smiled. I never needed credit. I only needed to feel seen. As years passed, our life grew fuller. The house became bigger. Responsibilities multiplied. The days moved faster. But something else changed too. Our conversations grew shorter. His gratitude grew quieter. My presence became something expected, like furniture that had always been there. I noticed it in small ways. He no longer asked how my day was. He assumed. Dinner would be ready. He forgot the little things that once mattered. At first, I brushed it aside. I told myself he was under pressure. That success demanded sacrifice. I told myself love meant patience. When friends asked how I was doing, I said I was fine. When family praised our marriage, I nodded politely. I did not want to disturb the image we had built. Inside, though, I was learning to disappear slowly. Not because he asked me to, but because I thought that was my role. I stopped talking about my own dreams. I stopped asking for time. I stopped expecting acknowledgement. I became reliable, dependable, quiet. And the more I gave, the less I expected in return. I remember one evening clearly. He came home tired and distracted. I handed him his meal, warm and familiar. He took it without looking up. No thank you.
No smile.
Just silence. It was a small moment, but it stayed with me. That was when I realized something important. Support, when given without balance, can slowly erase the one who gives it.
Still, I stayed.
I believed love meant endurance. I believed things would change on their own. I did not know then that small silences, left unspoken, grow into distance. And distance, when ignored, becomes pain. The changes did not happen all at once. They came quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing after a while. At first, it was small things. He would come home and go straight to his phone. Our dinners, once filled with talk, became quiet. I would ask him how his day went. He would say, "Fine," without lifting his eyes. I told myself not to take it personally. Work was demanding. Life was busy. Still, I missed the sound of his voice when he spoke to me with interest. I missed feeling included in his world. Some evenings, I sat across from him at the table and felt like a stranger sharing space. The plates clinked softly. The clock ticked on the wall. I would think of something to say, then decide it was not important enough. Slowly, I learned to keep my thoughts inside. I noticed how decisions were made without me. Plans changed without discussion. He assumed I would adjust the way I always had. Once he told me about a big choice he had made at work. He spoke with excitement. I listened carefully. When he finished, I asked why he had not mentioned it earlier. He shrugged and said, "I didn't think it mattered." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because it was cruel, but because it was careless. I began to feel like my role was to support from the background, not to share the center of his life. I still did everything I always had. I cooked. I cleaned. I listened. But inside, I felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. There were moments when I almost spoke up. Moments when I wanted to say, "I need you to see me." But the words stayed stuck in my chest. I was afraid of seeming ungrateful. The way people do when life is moving in their favor. I asked him how his day was. He nodded and said, "Good," without stopping. Then he said something that made my hands freeze. He told me he had accepted a new opportunity. A big one. Something that would change his schedule, his responsibilities, and our routine. He spoke with excitement, explaining how important it was for his future, for his growth. I listened quietly, like I always did. When he finished, I asked a simple question. "When did you decide this?" He looked at me, slightly surprised. Then he said, "A while ago." I waited. I thought he might add something else. But he didn't. I asked him gently why he had not talked to me about it earlier. Not with anger. Not with blame. Just curiosity. He sighed, as if the question itself was tiring. "I knew you'd understand," he said. "You always do." That was it. That single sentence settled deep inside me. He did not say he forgot to tell me. He did not say he wanted my opinion. He assumed my support. In that moment, I felt something break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack in my chest. I realized he no longer saw me as someone who needed to be included. I was the foundation. Solid. Silent. Something you stand on, not something you look at. I smiled and nodded. I told him it was fine. But inside, I felt very small. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room. The rain tapped against the windows. The clock moved slowly. I thought about all the choices he had made over the years. All the times I had adjusted my life around his decisions. I remembered moments when I had needed him, but chose not to ask. Moments when I put my feelings aside because his goals felt bigger. I realized then that my constant understanding had taught him something dangerous. It taught him that I would always be there. No matter what, no matter how little I was considered. That night, I did not cry loudly. I did not confront him. I just sat with the truth. I had supported him for years, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became a background presence. The woman who made things easier, not the woman whose worth needed remembering. I went to bed quietly. He was already asleep. I lay beside him, staring into the dark, and asked myself a question I could no longer ignore. What happens when love is taken for granted for too long? That was the night I understood. Not that he was cruel, but that he had forgotten my worth because I had forgotten to protect it myself. After that night, nothing changed on the outside. The house looked the same. Our routine continued. But inside me, something had shifted. I moved through the days with a new awareness. Not anger, not blame, just clarity. I noticed how often I moved around him without being noticed, how my presence filled the space without being acknowledged. And instead of shrinking, I began to observe. I stopped rushing to fill silences, stopped explaining myself, stopped smoothing every moment for comfort, not to punish him, but because I was tired. For the first time in years, I listened to my own feelings. They were quiet, but they were there. One evening, as I folded laundry, I realized how long it had been since I asked myself what I wanted. Not what was needed, not what was expected, just what I wanted. The thought felt strange, almost selfish,
but also honest.
I began with small things. I took walks alone in the evening. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, letting silence exist without guilt. I remembered the woman I used to be, the one who laughed easily, the one who had dreams of her own. Not loud dreams, simple ones.
Peace.
Connection. Being valued. One night, he noticed the change. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I nodded. Not defensive, not cold, just tired. He waited, expecting me to explain. I didn't. That was new for both of us. Days passed, then weeks. He began to look at me differently.
Not
because I demanded it, but because I was no longer disappearing. One evening, he asked if something was wrong. His voice was softer than usual. I took a breath. My heart beat slowly. And for the first time in a long while, I spoke honestly. "I've felt invisible," I said. Not accusing, not angry, just truthful. He looked surprised, then quiet. I told him about the small moments, the missed conversations, the decisions made without me. I told him how support slowly turned into silence, how being strong all the time made me unseen. I did not raise my voice. I did not list everything. I only shared enough to be real. He listened. That alone felt different. He said he never meant to make me feel that way. I believed him. But intention does not erase impact. I told him I needed partnership, not assumption. Presence, not just dependence. The room felt still after that. Heavy, but honest. Change did not happen overnight. Trust rarely does. But something opened between us. He began to ask again, to listen, to notice. And I began to speak before disappearing. Not because I was angry, but because I remembered my worth. I learned something important during that time. Love does not survive on sacrifice alone. It survives on recognition. Support is beautiful, but only when it flows both ways. I had supported him for years. Now I was learning to support myself too. And in doing that, I found something stronger than resentment. I found quiet strength. Life did not suddenly become perfect after that. We were still two people learning again. Some days were quiet. Some conversations felt careful. But they were real. I no longer tried to be everything without asking for anything. And he no longer assumed my silence meant strength. I learned that love is not proven by how much you give up. It is proven by how well you are seen while giving. For a long time, I believed that being needed was the same as being valued. I was wrong. Being needed can make you useful, but being valued makes you human. I also learned something about myself. That my worth did not disappear when he forgot to notice it. It only waited for me to remember. There were moments when I wished I had spoken sooner, when I wished I had protected my voice earlier. But regret has a quiet lesson too. It teaches us what we will not accept again. Today, when I sit at the same kitchen table, I feel different. Not because everything is fixed, but because I am present in my own life again. I speak when something matters. I pause when I need rest. I no longer disappear to keep peace. And when I support him now, it comes from choice, not obligation. If you're listening to this and feeling a familiar ache, I want you to know something. Love should not cost you your visibility. You can be kind without being invisible. You can be supportive without being silent. And if someone forgets your worth, it does not mean you have none. It means it is time for you to remember it yourself. That was the day my husband forgot my worth. And the day I finally found it again.